like you're not special. Like you're not that guy. You can't even speak Japanese, bro. Like what are you doing? Like
I did not think it was very good.
hot take.
I hated it.
And even if you want to be perfect at Japanese, you're never going to become perfect at Japanese. They don't even know that pitch accent exists.
Hello, my name is Gaijin Greg, and for my first non-update video, we have a very special guest today, the one and only 7Stop. How's it going, man?
Hello, thank you for having me on. I'm 7Stop. I'm a really hardcore AJATter. I started AJATT in 2020, and I've been making these kind of cringe YouTube videos for a while, since like 2022. But yeah, on my channel or on my Discord server, some people said they wanted to see me do a video with Gaijin Greg, and I've seen his updates. He always comments on my videos, so I was like, let's do a video, and I think we'll have a lot of interesting things to talk about.
Yeah, well, I'm super excited for today. I've left links to all of 7Stop's stuff down in the description below, so definitely go check out what he's got going on. Some great content for not only Japanese language learners, but every language learner. Okay, so I'm going to get right into the questions today. We got a lot of things to discuss, and I'm sure we can talk forever about language learning. It's one of my favorite things to do. So, first thing I want to talk about, and I think a lot of people are always curious about AJATTers and language learners of Japanese. I know you've talked a little bit about your end game being moving to Japan, and I would like to talk more kind of about what you believe your path to getting like a Japanese visa and potential permanent residency there.
Yeah, so there's a lot of ways that you can get a visa in Japan, and I have a path that I have in mind. There's a lot of other ways people can get a visa in Japan and live in Japan. And I did an interview recently with a man who lived in Japan for 15 years, and he talked a lot about how to get a job in Japan and stuff like that. Probably the number one way you all are going to be able to get a job in Japan get a visa in Japan is through a work visa. So that's what I'm planning to do. I'm planning to get a job in Japan when I graduate and get a work visa to live in Japan. And that's probably the most common path. But there's also student visa. That's really easy, but you can only be there while you're a student, obviously. So that's a very short-term way to live in Japan. And then there's a variety of other visas that are none of you guys are probably ever going to get these visas. They're like, I call them special visas. So you have like, well, me and my friends nickname it the slave visa. So if you're from like a poor country, like maybe Southeast Asia, you can basically get a visa to work in a factory or do some kind of low wage labor because of the, labor shortage in Japan. They're always looking for people to do those kind of jobs. So it's called like jishusei or something like that. You can get a visa to be a jishusei in Japan and work at a factory or something. Or you can get like cultural visa. I don't know a lot about it, to do some cultural activity. Or you can be on a business visa. So probably a lot of the influencers you might know about who live in Japan, most of them are on a business visa, which means they have some business. They started a business or moved a business to Japan, and they said, my business needs to be in Japan, and I'm going to, I want a visa. It's called a business manager visa or a startup visa to run my business in Japan. And, they have to prove that their business is profitable and kind of stuff like this. But that's another way you can get a visa. But the most relevant ones are probably going to be work and student visas. And then there's also, you can get a permanent residency. So eventually I'd like to get a permanent residency in Japan because I don't like the idea of my legal status being permanently tied to my employer. Like that sounds a little bit rough, but you can apply for a permanent residency in 1 year, or you can apply in 3 years, or you can get it in 10 years. So if you are the typical requirements for a permanent residency is that you get it, you live in Japan for 10 years and then you get it, or you marry a Japanese person and you get it. But you can also apply early as like a highly skilled person, a highly skilled worker, and then it's based on a point system. So I'm planning to go for that. Probably the 1 year one is a little bit stricter, so I don't think I'm going to get that. But maybe the 3-year one, I'd like to apply for the permanent residence.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And I think another thing a lot of people would want to hear about is like what type of jobs are the easiest or the best path to getting that worker visa.
Yeah, so the number one, the basic requirement is that you have to speak Japanese to get any job in Japan. You have to be at least like conversationally fluent in Japanese. I mean, there are English only jobs, but they're highly competitive. So if you're like, the most common job is going to be software engineering. So almost everyone I know living in Japan who's a foreigner who got a work visa is on some kind of tech related job, usually software engineering. You can have maybe infrastructure engineers or other kinds of tech related careers, data engineering and or like data science. But most people are there on some kind of tech job, and every once in a while you get someone who it's business related thing. They're very good at Japanese. They do business, or they were working at a foreign company and the foreign company sent them to Japan because they speak Japanese. That happens every once in a while. And then, of course, English teacher. English teacher is the one that probably people think of the most because it's very easy. Anyone can do that as long as you have a degree. But in terms of, I'd say this not meant to be too rude, but what we typically call skilled work, tech visa. Now, a tech worker visa is going to be the most common. And there's a lot of ways to get that, but that's the most common. And I know someone who's like a real estate agent or something like that, but it's pretty rare.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I've thought about this a lot. I have a family in America now, and so the likelihood of me moving to Japan is very low, but I always kind of like to live vicariously through people and kind of hear their story and their journey of moving abroad. And at what point did you know, like, hey, I want to move to Japan?
Yeah, so I never really intended to move to Japan, but I took learning Japanese very seriously. Like it was like almost my full-time job when I was a kid. Like I was doing it all the time. I treated it like an absolute duty. I must immerse and do Japanese all day, every day. And so it kind of seemed like the natural progression that I would eventually move to Japan. But I didn't actually decide to move to Japan until somewhat recently, within the past 2 years. And there was a couple of reasons that I considered it. Probably the first one was that I was dating a Japanese girl, and I thought the best way would be for me to move to Japan if we were going to be together. And another one was that the tech job market is kind of tough if you don't already have experience in the West. It's pretty tough. You need to be what we might describe as cracked. You have to be pretty good to get a job these days. And with the AI and all this stuff, there's a lot of concern about where the market's going. But Japan has a huge shortage of IT workers, and they don't have layoffs and things like that. So it also would be a lot easier for me to get a job in Japan compared to the grinding for a job in the U.S. So that's another factor. And in general, I find that having spent so many years just engaging with Japanese culture, I'm kind of disconnected from American culture. Like I don't think I have a single American friend who doesn't speak some level of Japanese. And like almost all my friends are either Japanese or someone who speaks Japanese. And more than half of my friends live in Japan. And so I think my social network, my whole life is already in Japan, even though I don't live there. But recently I did a poll on my Instagram just to get some statistics. So I wanted to know how much of my social circle is actually Japanese. And 51% were Japanese, 37% were American, and then the rest were living in another country.
Yeah, wow, that's cool. Yeah, I wish I could say the same. I do not have a Japanese speaking circle, so there is some bit of isolation here in the States. Getting weeb, like, why are you learning Japanese? I get that a lot. Yeah, and I a lot of times more from probably like the older crowd of like, why Japanese? And I'm like, well, do you want the short or like the long answer? But I'll leave it there. So I think you got some questions for me too, so we can kind of get into those.
Yeah. Well, just on our conversation here, I was just curious. So, you said you probably wouldn't be moving to Japan because of your family and all your stuff is in the U.S. Like, would you consider moving to Japan if there was a route for your family to come with you or something like that?
Yeah, 100%. I would definitely have to get my wife on board. I think until we go to Japan, I don't think she would ever consider it. There was a while, about a year ago, where we were looking at maybe moving to Europe or somewhere else. The hard thing is it's very hard for us on the American dollar, having worked for a while. My wife is a nurse. I'm a civil engineer, and working and then seeing the salary go down, even if the cost of living is significantly less as well. I think it's just hard for our American brains to really comprehend. I do think, in the future, I've told her, like, it would be great if we could do like a year or two, in Japan. And if we found that route, I think we should do it. We'd want to do it something where we're not going there to like teach English, where, I would be able to continue working in engineering. But the big thing, like I said, would be getting my wife on board and making her fall in love with Japan after our first visit sometimes. Because I know for sure, I feel like she might like Japan more than I do when she goes there, because she loves like Japanese food. She loves like hiking and a lot of outdoorsy, naturey things. And like, I think Japan, a lot of times people think like Tokyo and don't realize like how much else there is to do, and how like naturey, outdoorsy things you can do there that aren't in the city. So that would be, I think, my path would be something like that. If it were to happen, I would love to do it. It gets harder as our daughter, who is 7 months old at this point. If she got older, like, we wouldn't want to uproot her life too much. I think maybe early elementary school would probably be like the limit. Like, if she got to be 7 or 8 years old, like, then it might be a harder sell for us. For
sure. I mean, definitely the first point you made, it's probably going to be tough to stomach that pay cut. You're going to take a huge pay cut. And one thing people don't think about is if they have some kind of debt in dollars, they're probably not going to be able to pay that off. So if you have student loan debt or some like credit card debt or something, it might be difficult to pay that off if you're making money in yen. But yeah, definitely that's tough. And I think, it would be a hard sell if your daughter is older and you're like, okay, we're going to move to this foreign country. You don't speak the language. Let's go. But the best route would definitely be something like, I know people who do this. It's pretty difficult, but if you have some kind of remote job, like you can remote civil engineering for an American company, do that remotely and then live in Japan, that would probably be the best. Then you don't have to take the pay cut and you can keep staying in your career without having to do a lot of extra study, because you don't have to learn all that in Japanese if you're going to do that in Japan, right? So it's pretty tough.
Yes, yeah, engineering lingo in Japanese, I've peered over it a couple times. I'm like, oh boy, like this would be tough. But yeah, that definitely, I agree. The kind of I forget what the visa term is for that. There's that nomad visa. Digital nomad. Yep, that's it. That's what, if I find an opportunity like that, I think we would try to take it.
Yeah, I think the digital nomad visa, the one in Japan, it's like really bad. Like it's like 6 months or something, I think. It's basically an extended tourist visa, but there is, if you want to live for long term in Japan and you want to work in the US, the best route is actually through the business visa. So like, I know a guy whose company is going to help him set up a business in Japan so he can get a visa or something like that. But it's pretty challenging. You need lawyers and it's really complicated. So probably not something regular people are going to do. We can just pray that they make their digital nomad visa a little bit nicer.
Yeah, I can't remember. Maybe I'm remembering wrong, but I swear I saw like maybe they have a special deal with Canada or something.
Are you Canadian?
I'm not. Nope. I am not Canadian. I'm American. But I was jealous of the Canadians if that was true. I didn't read beyond the surface level too much.
I'm jealous of the Canadians because they get a working holiday visa for Japan.
That's what I was thinking of.
Yeah, if you had a working holiday visa, then you could just do whatever you want. It's so easy. They're so lucky.
Yeah. Well, maybe someday for us Americans.
And then I wanted to ask though, what is your end game? What is your end goal with Japanese? Do you just think of it as a hobby, or because I think you mentioned you want to go on a trip to Japan or something? So is that part of your end game? What's your final goal with Japanese?
Yeah, it's something I feel like that has always been nebulous for me. I know, like, ever since I was in high school and I first discovered anime, and like back then anime wasn't cool or as cool as it is now. And I remember like just being like, wow, like so many people are missing out on like how cool this thing is. And then over time through college, I was busy and fell off a bit. And then I guess I'll kind of take a step back here and give the bigger picture. So when I got to college, so I played football in college. So that's what took up a lot of my time. So I was a football player. I was doing civil engineering in school. And so you can imagine, did not have a lot of free time. And so after my like NFL dreams didn't pan out, I kind of was in a weird spot where I didn't know what I wanted to do with my time. I didn't want to know I didn't know what like I wanted to do with my life outside of work. Cause at that time I was just kind of working, aimlessly. And so I kind of went from hobby to hobby, finding a lot of different things that I liked to do. And so nothing really stuck a lot. The closest thing there was to kind of something sticking was I played Super Smash Bros. Ultimate competitively or semi-competitively for quite a while, and I found like a lot of joy in that because that kind of scratched my competitive itch, but I couldn't really help the feeling of like, hey, I'm just wasting my time playing a kid's game. Even though I love that game, I love the community, all the friends I've met through playing that game. A couple other things, I tried making a couple different YouTube channels in the past. Those didn't really pan out just because I kind of saw like the end game of like, hey, gaming is a super saturated content area, and I don't have the time with the family and with a job to really like do what's required to run a full-time, gaming and YouTube channel like that. And so I kind of thought back and was like, man, I always say like forever, I'm like, I'm going to learn Japanese one day. I'm going to learn Japanese one day. I'm going to do it. And I just got sick and tired one day of just saying like, I'm going to do this. And so I just went into like a 2-month rabbit hole, and like all I did for 2 months was just research language learning and like the modern what people think. And that's when I kind of went down the whole Matt versus Japan, the AJATT rabbit hole. And like, I was like, oh, this works. Like I see it. I believe it. And I was like, I want to do this, you know, not only because I enjoy so much Japanese media and like want to learn more about their culture through learning the language, but because like I just think it'd be cool. Like it, as simple as that. Like I was like, oh man, like that would just be so cool to actually go to a country and visit and like actually speak the language. And my family and I, we've gone on a couple trips internationally. So we've gone to like France, and my family, like quite a few of us like speak enough French to communicate and like talk with locals and stuff. And it was great. In Belgium, same thing. Like, it was like, oh my gosh, like, we're talking with the people. Like, we're really meeting real people and, like, talking to them and not just being, like, rude Americans. And then we went to Italy, and none of us speak Italian. And I just felt, like, so rude. Like, being there and, like, expecting, like, English and, like, expecting them to adapt to our needs as, like, tourists. And so, because I love like Japanese culture and media so much, and like I want to visit there so badly. Like I want that experience when I go there to be like, hey, I can go talk to locals, or hey, I can just go do something random and like not have to worry about getting lost or like being isolated because I literally don't speak the language. And so that's kind of my primary driver. But I do think, like we talked about a bit before, there's a little bit of me that still believes, hey, someday I'll get the opportunity to live in Japan if I have practiced this language and gotten to a good level. And so that little kind of ember still flickers.
I mean, you never know. It could happen. But I think that's a good point you made about that you don't like. I think it's kind of a unique problem to Westerners or English-speaking people is that they expect other countries to cater to their needs. Like there needs to be English. If I go to Japan, there's not English support. That's like a bad thing. But it's not your country. Like it's you're going into someone else's country and being like, speak my language, accommodate me. It's kind of like America. These like the same people in America who are like, speak English. Like when you go to someone else's country, it's kind of rude to demand them that they accommodate you. And so I totally understand that feeling. That's how I feel as well. And like, it would be like, I've considered maybe visiting Taiwan or Korea, but I would kind of feel awkward, like, cause I'm to be the stupid foreigner who doesn't speak the language and needs help all the time.
Yeah, that's literally my number one fear of international travel. And, my biggest fear right now is like Spanish speaking countries, because I've got family members who are supposed to speak Spanish based on how much time they've learned it in school throughout the years. But every time we go there, feels like somehow I'm like a Google Translate the whole time trying to figure stuff out.
I mean, it's really hard to get competent in a language just from taking classes, even if it's an easier language like Spanish.
Yeah, actually. Kind of while we're on that, I 100% agree. I do think sometimes us in like the immersion learning community do discount somewhat traditional classroom learning. And the only reason I say that is I think traditional classroom learning fails because one, we start very late in America, but the second thing, we don't like get people excited about language learning, or we don't get people who are truly engaged and like want to learn the language. And obviously like the whole structure of like grammar and like just spitting that back out is kind of I guess somewhat flawed, I'll say it. But I felt like in my 5 years of learning French in high school and college, like I actually got to like a semi-respectable level, but I did have some kind of hacks where my dad is Haitian, so they speak Creole, which is pretty close to French. So I got some half immersion, I don't know what you want to call it, throughout my whole life growing up, listening to him speak that with family. But even still, there were some people in our class that did really care, and I would say it almost primed them to like really learn almost instantly when immersion happened. Like if we had someone in our class who went to France and came back, and we literally were like, "Oh my God, like you're French!" Like, and I feel like if people took it more seriously, you'd see maybe more results like that. But maybe that's a commentary on all American school. It's kind of all just checking a box. Can you memorize this? Can you do that? But I do think there are some benefits to it, but efficiency-wise, obviously not the best use of time.
I think that the reason that people, well, I mean, I think that classes are obviously very inefficient and not that helpful, but a big asterisk we have to place on this is that it really depends on what language you're learning. So, I mean, like the people that take Spanish classes and are really into learning Spanish, they're probably going to study on their own time, and maybe they'll get some immersion that way. And if they're really motivated to study, because Spanish is like a pretty easy language comparatively, you can still get pretty far. So I think that the traditional like system is kind of designed like it kind of worked for people who were learning Spanish and French and languages that are somewhat similar to English, but when applied to something like Japanese, it just becomes a huge mess. It's really hard to learn that way.
I 1,000% agree. I remember when I first started my journey, my plan was like, I'm going to take classes at a university sometime. And now I look back, I'm like, what was I? Like, I would have wasted so much time and money, like, doing that. Like, yeah.
Japanese is almost like the most different language you could possibly learn from English. The only thing it has in common is loan words. But other than that, it's basically everything is different from English. So that setting just really doesn't work for Japanese. And I think that's why we saw such a huge immersion community build up around Japanese, because Japanese is a super popular language that's extremely hard to learn through any traditional method. And so a lot of people seeking to learn this popular language discovered that there's a more effective way.
A more fun way, that's for sure.
This is kind of related to classes, but I'm planning to make a video about grammar, learning grammar resources, and I wanted to ask you, what are the most important beginner resources you used in general and specifically to learn grammar? Because I think you mentioned doing active grammar study, and this is probably something we might disagree on because I personally never really did. Like after the first year, I didn't really do much active grammar study of any kind, but I wanted to talk about this and get your perspective on these kind of more traditional resources and how they can be used to supercharge your immersion.
Yeah. So I started when I first got into Japanese. The first resource that I used of Japanese was actually not Duolingo, but Lingo Deer. I used them to learn hiragana and katakana. But after that, I was like, okay, I'm done. I know I got to stay away from these. It can be fun. Like the games, I understand how people get hooked on them because I did them for like a week. I'm like, oh my God, like I'm learning so much. Like, and then now I'm like, oh my God, they've got like an AI, like mispronouncing words or like just like completely weird stuff going on. I know they've gotten a lot better, but I just want to reemphasize for everybody listening that I believe like they're great tools for kind of learning those kana at the beginning, but after that, there's a lot better things you can probably be spending your time on. So after that, what I did was immediately I just started like immersing in stuff that I had already watched in English before. So I watched like a lot of my old like favorite anime. And I had no idea what I was listening to at first for the most part. And you're not going to, and accepting that you're not going to is important for anybody who's in the earlier stages out there. Like that beginning period sucks and you're going to have to power through it. And how long it lasts, I feel like can be somewhat lowered, like the amount of time it takes to get past that with some of this active grammar study. And it's a little bit of a trap because if you get too much into it, you're not immersing and then you're kind of trying to systematically build a language in your head instead of really just acquiring it. But I started with Take Him and I did not think it was very good.
Oh, hot take.
I hated it. And I did all of it. I went through all of it, but I really hated it because I felt like because it was text based, it was just much harder to understand when it's like, man, like get rid of all these kanjis in here and like get rid of, I can't comprehend it. And there was like a list of vocabulary. It's like, this means that. And I'm like, like, what does this all mean? Because I was so new and learning so much at that time that I felt like the text-based nature of the guide made it very difficult to understand. And now, like looking back at it now, I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But that's because I've kind of already learned it through immersion and through some other means. But in general, I think that's probably my overall take on grammar is that some of it may not make sense while you're like studying it, but don't dwell on it too much because you're going to eventually understand it. Then you're going to kind of retroactively go back and think about those lessons you did of grammar or what you learned and be like, oh, that's what they meant when they explained it. It just kind of signals to your brain a little bit like, hey, look out for this. And if you use it as such, I think it can be very helpful. Some other grammar resources I did use Japanese Amo with Misa on YouTube, her video series. I thought those were really helpful. I actually took hand notes on those videos just to kind of make it stick to my brain. But again, I didn't ever review the notes or anything like that because I don't think that's a valuable use of time. But I think the best grammar resource, hands down, is Curedolly.
Oh.
And maybe another hot take alert here. I know a lot of people can't stand the voice, but I felt that Curedolly taught grammar in a very much Japanese perspective rather than teaching it from an English or American perspective of how to think about things and just thinking about the actual structure of the language was very helpful. And when I did watch Curedolly, I had more time under my belt, so I think that helped maybe make it make more sense because it was a lot of stuff I already understood. But I feel very helpful from the beginning, and the best in my opinion. But like you said, I think at the end of the day, you're gonna kind of acquire a lot of grammar pretty naturally. And you're not going to need to stress too much about this or that. And eventually you'll get to the point where you just look up something in context of, hey, I don't understand this. What is going on? I think at first, the hard thing is recognizing what is kind of a grammar point or vocab and kind of distinguishing the different parts of Japanese sentences or the way they're kind of constructed naturally. So that's kind of my thoughts. If I were to go back and redo it, I would actually probably try to learn Japanese with Japanese grammar videos, by Japanese teachers speaking in Japanese. It sounds wild, but every time I've kind of had one of those pop up on my recommended feeds, they're using very basic, their language, they're speaking slow, they know they're talking to people who are learning Japanese, and they're going to appropriately create examples given, what grammar point you're learning, what level you'd approximately be at. So I think those might be interesting to experiment with because you'd be getting immersion and also being taught grammar through the Japanese perspective at the same time. But I don't know. Sounds like you mostly did immersion to kind of learn grammar. Is that accurate?
Well, just a quick question. When you say watch Japanese videos, do you mean with English subtitles or just fully in Japanese?
Fully Japanese. That's what I think.
That's wild. Well, I actually think we have a lot of similar opinions. I think we've come to similar conclusions about a couple things here. But I've engaged with pretty much all of these resources, all of the Japanese grammar resources. I've probably read them. I've read Tai Kim. I read Genki. And Tai Kim is actually just Genki Crash Course. And that's what I discovered. So instead of recommending Genki, I always just recommend Tai Kim because it's faster. But I did Tai Kim, but I also did Curedolly. And I also used a number of other various resources. So I'm pretty familiar with all of these different resources. But I still usually recommend Tai Kim to people because I'm kind of thinking because I agree that Curedolly is actually the best grammar guide because it teaches Japanese grammar the same way that Japanese people understand Japanese grammar. Because the other grammar resources, they teach you an English perspective of Japanese grammar. But Japanese people actually learn their grammar completely differently. So Curedolly is the most faithful grammar guide, and that's the way that Japanese people learn grammar in school. But I never usually recommend that to people because I thought it might be too abstract for someone who hasn't already learned a little bit to use. That's something I'm really interested in, is learning if that can be helpful to someone who's a beginner. But yeah, I think that Tai Kim is. I think that you shouldn't read it and try to understand it. Tai Kim or any grammar guide, because you're not going to understand it because it's it's very abstract if you haven't already learned Japanese. So what I always recommend is people to read a grammar guide but you don't have to memorize it. Just read it and get a general idea. Oh, this is how the language works. And then when you immerse, you use it as a reference. So, and probably the same with Japanese or what is it? Miso Ama. What is that you were talking? The video series. I've heard of that one too. But Japanese Ama with Miso or something, right?
Yep, that's it.
Any resource, same with that. Like you probably want to go through it once to get an idea of what structures exist in the language, and then where would I look if I wanted to, refresh my memory. And then when you're immersing, if you encounter a structure that's unfamiliar, you look it up in the guide and you read about it and try and use that to help you understand a little bit better. That's what I usually recommend.
Yeah, no, I think it's always good context also for people to remember that, like, in your native language, you never think about grammar ever. And I don't know any of I know some from school, but I don't know many English grammar rules, and I probably break all the rules all the time, sometimes intentionally with nuance. But yeah, I think that, people in general, there's a lot of, again, more traditional language learning settings focus on grammar a lot. Which I think is kind of like ironic because like when Japanese people try to learn English, they always like are super grammar heavy and like drill. And so you kind of see like the not great outcomes of that a lot of times with like native Japanese speakers trying to learn English, how their English is a lot of times, if they aren't exposed to a lot of it, is very, what's the word, like stiff, like very stiff English. And so I think just understanding that grammar is kind of just a made up thing that humans, like, it's kind of a vague abstract concept and it exists, but it doesn't at the same time almost.
Yeah, especially the Tai Kim Genki style of grammar. It is actually so made up because the Japanese people don't even think their language works that way. We just literally made it up so that we could explain it to people who speak English. So I think, and I actually think a lot of linguistics in general, there's a lot of stuff that is kind of arbitrarily applied to languages where they don't necessarily apply because the structure is based on a certain number of native languages of the people who created the structure. So I think that it's a very interesting concept to think about.
Yes, it definitely is. And I've got another really good question that I'm sure a lot of people are going to be excited about. So you've been to Japan a couple times, I believe, right?
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Yep. And so going to Japan as someone who can speak Japanese, obviously you kind of like unlock some other stuff that you can't do as a normal tourist. So I want to get your recommendations of, what a Japanese learner should do in Japan that they couldn't do otherwise.
Yeah, it's a completely different experience to go to Japan and speak Japanese. And I think there's value in hitting the typical tourist destinations. Like if you want to see Kyoto, you want to go to Tokyo, you want to go to Osaka, you want to go to these places that everyone goes to. That's cool too. But there's a lot of experiences that you can only have if you speak Japanese. And I'm not really that big into like tourist kind of stuff. So I haven't actually had that many interesting tourist experiences, but I have had a lot of experiences that happened because I spoke Japanese. So probably the most interesting thing, the most useful thing is that you're going to be able to meet friends. So in my case, I was like chronically online. Like I had a lot of online friends in Japan that I had never met. So when I went to Japan, I already had a bunch of people that I wanted to hang out with. So basically every day I was meeting someone that I met online. I would go on trips with people, And that was a really great experience to meet all of my online Japanese friends. So if you are learning Japanese and you want to go to Japan, I highly recommend that before you go to Japan, you try and make a couple friends online, like Japanese friends, so that you can hang out in Japan. Because what you'll find is even if you speak Japanese, you might actually not have many chances to really speak the language, even though you're in Japan, especially if you're traveling with other foreigners. You'll probably speak English to your friends, and there's not many opportunities to interact with locals in a natural way, especially if you struggle with like you would feel awkward approaching a random person or something. You're probably not gonna have many opportunities to speak unless you already have friends. So I really recommend that. But another thing you can do is you can have random encounters with just random people. Like I did that a lot. I just go up to someone and start talking to them. But that really takes practice, and you have to have good social skills and not be weird. But like I see like a guy on the street with a cool shirt, I'll say something to him and then we'll start talking. And one time I was walking down the street in Osaka, and there was a guy pushing his bike, and I just started talking to him. And it turns out he was actually doing immersion English. He knew who Matt versus Japan was. He saw because Matt's been on a couple Japanese YouTuber videos, and he knew who Matt was from Japanese YouTube, and he knew about immersion, and he was like, yeah, I'm learning English. Yeah, that's so cool. And like we hit it off just because I talked to some random guy who was wheeling a bike while I was walking down the street. So there's a lot of interesting opportunities. Another example would be like when I was climbing Mount Fuji, there was a streamer, a famous Japanese streamer, and my Japanese friend was watching his stream, and he was climbing Mount Fuji, and he saw me in the guy's stream, and he sent me a message while I was on Mount Fuji, and he's like, this guy's streaming. So I went up to the guy and started talking to him in Japanese. I'm like, are you the streamer? And he's like, no, I'm not the streamer. Like, I know you're the streamer. And then he's like, yeah, I'm the streamer. And then we were talking, and my friends came over, and we all spoke Japanese on his stream. We hung out for a while. So that was another opportunity that I only had because I spoke Japanese. In addition to that, there's just a lot of things in general that require Japanese knowledge to do, or you could maybe scrape by with just English, but it's just awkward and like uncomfortable. And so there's like, if you can go to a certain place, maybe you can go to an onsen in the middle of nowhere in the Inaka, and you can talk to people, you can do things because you speak Japanese. So one thing I did was I went on Hello Talk, I met a random guy, and I'm like, let's go climb a mountain. And then we took a journey into the middle of nowhere. We got on a train and went into the middle of nowhere in the Inaka. There was no convenience stores where we were, but there was like an old woman who was like running this shop. We bought water from her, and she was using like an abacus to count change. That's how old this place was. But we went to an onsen, but like it all happened because I spoke Japanese, and I just messaged a random guy, and I was like, oh, let's hang out and climb a mountain.
Yeah, no, I think kind of the opportunity for like adventures like that would be something I'm looking forward to. And I think that's really good insight too, of like, hey, you should have some friends before you go over there, or try speaking with people and having maybe a community there that you can meet up with and mingle with. Because I can agree that my other international trips, like, yes, there were opportunities to speak French when we went, but you know, a lot of it was like you're at a restaurant, you're ordering, or situations like that. You know, there are some other situations, but maybe not like those are more maybe like survival or get by situations rather than like really enjoying or like getting to know Japan more type situations.
Absolutely. And you can, as I said, you can always go up to people and just start random conversations, but that takes a lot of confidence and a lot of like probably a lot of social skills that Japanese learners usually don't have. So I think it's really useful to like build a friend group before you go to Japan. Two other things is that if you are a guy A lot of guys like Japanese girls. You can get a girlfriend if you speak Japanese. You couldn't do that if you didn't speak Japanese. Probably not, but that's one. And if you're like into like partying, if you're a party animal, I don't know, probably you don't seem like a party animal, but if you want to drink or something, then it also helps to speak Japanese. You can go hang out with people and drink and stuff like that.
Yeah, that does honestly look fun, though. I have heard some, like, interesting stories from Japanese learners, and they're like, oh, like, Japanese people are typically more reserved, but you go, get a couple drinks with them, and then you start, and it's like, oh, like, what just happened? So I think that would be something I'd want to try for sure. Just, like, go to a random bar and see what happens. I do have some friends that I keep like, hey, you should learn Japanese. They like love Japanese women and like the culture too, but they don't want to like commit to learning the language. I'm like, I feel like that would be if you find your wife, a good reward. But
yeah, I mean, I got a Japanese girlfriend because I learned Japanese, and I think a lot of people who are in this community ended up dating, or maybe a man, maybe you're a girl and you want to date a man, or maybe you're a man and you want to date a man. I mean, if you like Japanese people and you want to date a Japanese person, you have to learn Japanese. Another thing that can help is with socializing in Japan is if you have a foreigner, like another foreigner who also speaks Japanese, and you go as a tag team and talk to people, it can be a lot less stressful that way. You can share the burden of like the social anxiety of talking to people you don't know.
That's great advice. Great advice.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, this is kind of going back a little bit, but we get off track really easily. So I'm going back to my original question. One of the questions I wanted to ask is, in your videos, you talk a lot about your experiences learning Japanese as a working adult. But do you think the gains that you get from that are worth it for people who have limited time? And what do you think is the biggest limiting factor for you? Like maybe hobbies, work, family, other responsibilities. And how did you overcome those things?
Yeah, I definitely have a lot of thoughts about this, and I'm a little wishy-washy, and I go back and forth because life is such a gray area. But overall, I really think like Japanese in general, you probably need 2 hours a day or more to really be satisfied with the gains you're making. I would love if I had more than 2. But I just always kind of known from the beginning, like, I'm going to burn myself out if I do more, given my schedule. I think if you are looking to learn a language and you have less than 2 hours a day, maybe you have an hour to an hour and a half, and maybe something that's a little more close to English would be good. But there's nothing stopping you still from doing Japanese an hour a day. I think you should curate how you do your Japanese. Like, I wouldn't spend 30 minutes out of your 60 minutes a day on Anki. I would really try to focus on like immersing if you only have such a limited amount of time. But so I think, you need about 2 hours a day. And I know some people, or a lot of people, this is where I start getting into kind of some maybe more hardcore views on life. And this kind of comes from my background as a football player and in college. In college, when I played football and was going to school, there'd be many days where it's like, hey, you wake up the alarm clock has a 4 on it, and it's never good when your alarm starts with a 4. And then I'd be, working late in the computer lab on school till past midnight, and I had an internship, and I had way too much going on. But I found through that a lot of kind of life hacks, and hack number 1 I've always found to be is that you have way more time than you probably think you do, and you're wasting so much time in your day that you don't realize. And I've had friends come to me like, man, I'm so busy, and I'm like, no, you're not. Like, let's do an experiment for a week. I want you to like set an alarm for 15 minutes, and every 15 minutes, and you write down what you're doing, and you'll realize immediately, like after one day, you'd be like, oh my God, like, what am I doing with my time? And like some of my friends who say this, they're like playing League till like 2 a.m. And it's like, okay, guys, like let's be real here. You do have some time. Now, how you choose to spend that is totally up to you. And if you don't want to spend it doing something, that all power to you. But I think people should really be conscious and honest with themselves. Like, hey, no, I'm spending my time this way. Maybe not that you don't have time at all. And I do think there are some people who legitimately do not have time, and they are busy all day. But it takes kind of being conscientious and really looking at your schedule and the nitty gritty to determine that. And so what I did when I started, I didn't have a daughter yet. And so I was just working. It was just me and my wife living together. And I'm like, okay, like 2 hours a day, I can fit that in. And I'm still going to have time for my other hobbies. It's still not going to be too busy. And it was pretty smooth sailing, to be honest. I probably could have pushed a little harder. I probably could have done 3 hours a day, but I kind of knew, like, long term, I was like, I knew we were planning on having kids. And I knew at that point, like 2 hours a day, maybe pushing it a little bit, but, you know, eventually I'd be able to settle into a routine where 2 hours a day was still feasible. So I kind of just set from the beginning, hey, this is 2 hours. I do it. If I really feel like doing more on a day, I will. But typically it was like, hey, I hit my 2 hours. Now I'm going to spend my time on another hobby, or I'm going to spend time with my wife to make sure I didn't burn out. And I think that's maybe a tip. You know, if you do have limited time, don't try to like make it up on the days where you do have a little more free time. So like on your weekends, like don't go 1 hour a day, Monday through Friday, and then go like 6 hours a day on Saturday and Sunday. Like maybe that works for you, but I think it's likely to lead to burnout, and it's going to make you feel even less like you have free time to do other things. And sure, you can basically go all in on Japanese and AJATT, all Japanese all the time. I think it's very hard to like truly pull off like a true AJATT experience. Like I think most people have too much going on in their lives. And so that's where I kind of like a lot of like the messaging that comes with like the Refold program. I think they talk a lot about like time management and like how you can like get into a routine and like how do you make these habits more consistent. I think that's the biggest thing for people is like get that habit and you have to do it. Like you have to be hard on yourself, and it sounds bad, but you also have to have the wisdom to know when it's like, oh, I really was too busy. Like I deserve not to be upset that I didn't hit 2 hours that day. And so where I've landed a lot is like, okay, like I've got a wedding this day. It's like I've been in weddings where I've been like, oh, like I'm just not going to do Japanese today. I'll do my Anki in the morning when I wake up. And I just know like I got to be present in the moment and experience life. And like, that's just not a Japanese day for me. And that is like the only time, like situations like that. Like I don't typically, like there have been a couple days here and there where it's like you feel sorry for yourself. You were busy till the end of the day. Like you could stay up and do it, but I've been like, I'm at like an hour and a half. Like I'll just call it here, get some sleep. I feel like I have a pretty good bearing on myself of like, okay, like I'm tired and like lack of sleep is going to catch up with me and burn me out harder. Like I need to sleep. And this sounds bad, and this is again where I get a little more hardcore. Like, I don't feel like most people are good at doing that. I feel like most people slip up and say like, oh, I don't need to do it. And then it's like, oh, all of a sudden you're not learning your language anymore. And so I think that's the most important skill when you're busy. But I've honestly found that the more busy you are, the more easy it is to be efficient with your time and be like, okay, I only have X amount of time available a day for Japanese. I know as soon as that time becomes available, I need to lock in. I can't be surfing on social media or just lollygagging around, basically. But definitely the hardest thing was when my daughter was born. Like the difficulty level at least doubled for sure. To maintain that 2 hours. The beginning was just sleep. It was like, oh my God, like I can't immerse properly. It felt like it was like my comprehension just felt so bad because I was just tired and like my brain was not in peak operation mode essentially. And since then, now that she sleeps better, it's been a lot better. But still, it limits the amount of time you have in a day when you have a kid. And the way my wife and I's work schedule works, because she's a nurse and works in the evenings, I am basically like alone in the nighttime with my daughter, so I can't do anything until she goes to bed. And in the morning, I leave pretty early for work. So it's kind of basically I've got my slot at the end of the day, and that's where I got to get my Japanese in. And you know, some things that I think you can do to alleviate that and make it easier for you if you do have a busy schedule is there's some like, and I'm not saying you should plan your life around learning Japanese or learning any language, but if you are serious and you do want to make some like tweaks to your life, I think like changing your work schedule, you know, I start work at 7 a.m. I actually think I probably should start work at 9 a.m. and like wake up and immerse from like 6:30 to 8:30. I feel like that would probably actually be the easiest for me and just getting it done in the morning. I know some people aren't morning people, but I think you are much less likely to not do it if you wake up in the morning and just do it right away. But if it gets to the end of the day and just like BS happens, like it's very easy for BS to happen in life, and just avoiding that by just doing it at the beginning, I think, is something that maybe makes sense. And if you have the opportunity to work from home, definitely take that. I used to work from home. Now I'm on like a hybrid schedule, and like I just lose like an hour a day of commute, and it's just dumb. Yeah, I don't know why I'm doing it. I'm looking to maybe change it right now. Yeah, because I get forced into doing like 20 minutes of passive immersion in the morning that like is just like, it's like semi-passive, I guess, because I don't know. Like I don't pay attention when I drive. It sounds weird. Like I'm actually focused on the Japanese and only the Japanese.
I'm the same way.
Yeah, but it's right in the morning, which like sometimes I'm just not awake yet. Like I'm in the car because I'm not paying attention to driving. Like I just zone out sometimes. So like that could be, you know, those days where I do go in the office, that could just be more time of like, you know, doing like much more like Japanese mode, I kind of call it, when I'm like in my own comfort area. I'm at my computer. I can do everything I want to. I can, you know, mine sentences, etc., etc. So, and then, you know, after my daughter was born, kind of following up on that and kind of on the work thing, that's when I definitely felt like other hobbies go on the back burner a bit. Like, I'm a big gamer. I talked before about, like, I played Smash Bros. Competitively for a while. Like, actually, last weekend, I went to my first Smash Bros. Tournament in 10 months. And, like, it was super fun. I'm like, man, like, it's crazy that, like, I haven't done it in that long. But that's kind of one of the sacrifices I've kind of had to make to remain consistent at Japanese studying. I am a huge like RPG fan. I've got my Final Fantasy VII shirt on right now. So I'm at the point where I honestly should be playing more games in Japanese. I don't count my game time in Japanese as immersion. Like I don't track it. I probably should, but because it is obviously, but I just kind of consider it's hard to like quantify. Like if you're just, I know this is the attack button in like an RPG. Like I'm not reading tatakao or anything like that. Like I'm just like click, click, click. But I think that could be like a medium of, it's like, oh, integrate some of your hobbies into Japanese. And I want to start doing that more because I've got so many games on my backlog, and a lot of them are Japanese games that are like RPGs. Like I know I want to play Metaphor ReFantazio really badly, and just think the game is sitting in the plastic still, which I used to make fun of all my uncles for that. I'm like, why you bought this game and you don't play it? And now I'm like, damn, that was too real. But yeah, I know I rambled a bit there, but that's my thoughts.
Yeah, I think it really depends on the game. Like, if it's dialogue heavy, that could be a really useful source of immersion. But if it's mostly gameplay, then maybe not so much. But yeah, something you alluded to earlier, like, I think most of the people who did like hardcore AJATT, they had a special circumstance in their life that allowed them to do that. And usually it's like pretty young kids. Like if you're an adult, you can't really do that. But it's usually like high school. Like for me, it was because of coronavirus. My high school was online and my classes were super easy. And I didn't spend a lot of time in school. So I could dedicate almost all of my time to Japanese. Even in class, I was like listening to Japanese. But most people who did a really hardcore schedule had some kind of special circumstance that made that possible. I think even for the average college student, that's not realistic, doing that much immersion. But yeah.
What do you think is a realistic amount? I'm assuming you're in college right now, I think, from watching your videos. Yeah. What do you think is a realistic amount of time that a college student could immerse in a day while still maintaining like a social life and like not becoming a hermit, basically?
I think it's really difficult because it really depends on what you're studying. Because like if you're studying business, you might have a lot of time, but if you're studying engineering, you probably have to grind quite a bit. And it depends how rigorous your school is and stuff like that. But in my case, I don't really consider it immersion anymore with Japanese, like because my whole life outside of school is in Japanese. But I mean, every day I'm probably getting several hours of exposure to Japanese. But I'd say you can probably get most college students can probably get 2 to 3 hours if they maximize their time. Just like you said, you actually have way more time than you think. And this is something I'm guilty of too. I waste a lot of time doing things that are not very productive. But if you are really serious about learning Japanese, and you can probably make the time. So I feel that most college students probably could make the time, but it definitely depends. And there's going to be like periods where maybe you can't make any time because you have a lot of tests and you have to study a lot. But in general, you can probably get 2 to 3 hours out of the average college student's schedule. But I know there's some people that have really brutal schedules, like Ivy League medical students or something like that. That stuff's really tough, but probably for the average person, you can make a decent amount of time.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like I said, I'm pretty hardcore, and with how much time we spent on football, I felt like if I wasn't, I mean, I don't know how many hours we spent a week, but it was, I think, 20 plus usually on football. And if that wasn't there, now I know I would have been less efficient with my time if I wasn't doing that. But yeah, I totally agree. I think people could find times, and maybe you've got to, ebb and flow with the seasons of school. And especially as you get later on in college, like I felt like the classes became much more serious of like, oh, like this is my field.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, recently I've really been quite a hermit, to be honest. I have not gone outside very much, and like I've pretty much every day in this room, I study all day. I made the unfortunate decision of I have this weird schedule that kind of got me into the situation where I needed to take 5 core classes all at once. So usually you have these fluff classes that make things a little bit easier, but I actually have 5 classes all at the same time that are all core classes, and several of them are some of the hardest classes in my major. So I currently spend almost all of my time in this room grinding, and all of my Japanese friends went home, so I'm pretty alone, to be honest. And I'm just grinding all the time. But I think I still waste a lot of time. But I mean, I'm grinding, I'm studying. I mostly study. I'm mostly studying and doing homework. And then I do Japanese still. I make YouTube videos still on the side. So I'm able to make time, but I definitely could more efficiently use my time, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I'm the same way. I still waste time. And I think there is some amount of like decompression time you almost need in a day, just because we're not robots, obviously. Like we need to let our brain basically do nothing sometimes. And like there are some people who can just be go, go, go 24/7. I'm not one of those people.
You'll burn out.
Yeah, definitely. And burnout, like the worst thing you can do for like language learning or life in general is honestly burnout. Like because as long as you're doing something, it's better than nothing, which is where you'll be if you burn out.
Yeah. I think there's another factor people don't consider very much, which is I think the number one reason people burn out is that their health is bad. So if you're not sleeping, you eat like garbage food all the time, and like you need to take care of your body, and I think that'll probably that'll help a lot. Like I have a hard time sleeping a lot of the time, but if I'm well rested, I'm usually like good all day. I can study hard, I can work, do whatever. But if I'm like really tired, I just don't want to do anything. It's really hard. So I think that taking care of your health is an important part of maintaining like a consistent, disciplined routine.
Yeah, I want to talk about that a little bit. I actually have had kind of with my Japanese journey, like a bunch of ups and downs with health, and just like physical wellness essentially. So like when I started Japanese, like I was in the middle, I don't know if you've heard of like the 75 hard routine. So I was doing that and I was like, well, I might as well just add in like Japanese. I'm like being disciplined right now, and it was great. And then I was doing really good, and then slipped up a bit for a while. And like you said, I was eating a lot of junk food because I was getting stressed about time, and it was a busy time at work. And so like I wasn't putting good stuff into my body. I ended up being tired a lot, sacrificing sleep a lot for like late nights at work, which definitely is like the number one way to stop learning language is like going too hard at work. I've gotten close a couple of times where it's like, oh my gosh, like I just need to like set the boundary and like I'm leaving at this time. And I think that's another thing that can be helpful for people who are working. Like if you do care about Japanese, and I know it's easier said than done because I struggle with it too, but if you're 9 to 5 or whatever, like you clock in, you clock out, and you try to leave what's at work, and you have your personal time at the end of the day. But kind of going back to my story, I kind of have had a roller coaster. Then instead of doing the 75 hard after I completed that the first time, I went and did the 150 hard. I just made it up, and I was like, I'll do 150 days this time. And I did that, and I got really in like the best shape I've been in since college. Like I ran like almost almost got into the 4 minutes in like a mile run time. And then when I had my daughter, then I started feeling sorry for myself in like the physical wellness department again. And I started being like, I'm going to eat some more junk. I don't have time to cook. Like I'd tell myself all the excuses and like, oh, work is crazy. Like I don't have time for this, that, blah, blah, blah. And I kind of got in a little funk again of like, okay, I'm putting on weight. I don't feel good. I have no energy. I can't do anything I want to do because I feel like I'm just barely making it through every single day. And like that, like I'm just getting out of one of those funks right now. And it feels great knowing that like I'm on the up and up, but like it also feels bad that's like, man, like how did I let myself get to that point where I was just like overextending myself in such a way that like basically almost every, like, not that I came close to quitting Japanese, but it was just like, oh my gosh, like it got put on the back burner for like 1 week. Like literally all I did was just my Anki for the week because like I was just prioritizing work, and then I would just I would basically, eat junk on the way home. And then after that, I would just take care of my daughter. Then when she went to bed, I would work more. And it was like, oh, like, so don't let yourself get into funks like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I can empathize with a lot of things you said as well. Like, I also recently kind of had something like that happen. But I was honestly, I was kind of depressed last semester, and I would like eat a lot of junk food, stay up really late. Until recently, had like this awful schedule. I've been staying up really late, but I decided I'm gonna correct this. I was literally on Japan time, so I decided like I can't do this. Like I need to wake up in the morning. So I started fixing my schedule. But I had a period where I was like, I was in a really bad health. I stopped working out. I was like drinking alcohol alone. I was eating all these just junk food, and like I had really bad mental health, and my grades dropped. It was really bad. So one of the most important things is just to take care of yourself, get some exercise, see the sun every once in a while, eat some decent food. Like you gotta do this. You have to talk to some other human beings every once in a while. Like it's really important.
Yeah, and I think it's so important to talk about because it's not really talked about a lot. But I feel like a lot of like the language learning community, like or like the language learning process, can make some of those things like an easy spiral to kind of fall into. So definitely always be alert for that, people. Okay, I've got another question here. So I wanted to talk about how much do you read? I think from watching your videos, sounds like you're originally, at least, you were more of like a listening man, and I'm kind of curious if you found ways to enjoy reading more or implement more reading into your routine.
Yeah, so at the beginning, I was doing basically listening only. In fact, for 9 months, I did raw listening only. I didn't use any subtitles, which was, as you would imagine, probably really hard. That was really hard to learn from. But I was doing so much input that I still learned because I was like actually all Japanese all the time. But what I was always really focused on listening, and I struggled to get into reading anything more complex than a manga. So I read my first book like 1.5 years in, but I started reading like a year in, and then I read like a light novel like 1.5 years in, and I would read like I would force myself to read. I didn't really like it at all. Like I would kind of force myself to read, and I was like kind of bored and like I didn't like it, and I'd force myself to read like a book a month or something, like book or two a month, because I was doing it a lot, so I had time to like read a book or two a month, and also do like hours of listening immersion every day. So I was still focused on listening, but I could never really get into reading for a long time. But as my Japanese got better, just through general immersion listening, and I also spent a lot of time talking to Japanese people, messaging people, reading the internet, things like that, my reading also got better, and I started to feel more comfortable with reading. So like nowadays, I actually really enjoy reading. I just don't have a lot of time to read because usually when I'm immersing, I'm actually doing something else. Like I'm usually doing passive or semi-passive immersion where I'm talking to someone, but I still read a little bit before I go to bed most days. But yeah, after I got better at Japanese and I read more books, like I've read like 34 books up to this point, I managed to start to like it more, and especially if I really like the content. I think a part of it was that I didn't like the content. I was reading books because I wanted to learn Japanese and I didn't enjoy the books. And I forced myself to read and I still learned from it, but I didn't enjoy it. But there's an anime too. Mushoku Tensei is like a famous anime, but there's also a book series, and I've read that series. That's been my favorite thing to read. I've still not completed it, but like 2 years ago, I started reading it, and I really liked it. I read like a volume in a week or something, and after that, I started to enjoy reading a lot more. And another thing is, as I got older, I've kind of started caring less about what we might describe as like autistic words, or like there's a lot of people who obsess over these really rare words and like niche cultural knowledge and stuff like that. And as I got older, I kind of stopped caring about that, but I'm more interested to engage with like maybe self-help books or something like that will improve my life in some intangible way.
Yeah, it sounds like we kind of have similar thoughts on reading. I struggle to like find the desire to read right now, and like it's not a Japanese thing. It's like I freaking hate it in English too. Like I just have always, since I was a kid, been like super resistant to reading. Like it's not that I can't read, obviously. It's just that like I do not enjoy it that much. Like there's been exceptions of like books that I found, I'm like, oh my God, I can't put it down. But for the most part, I've always just been like, I don't like it. And part of that's been like, for whatever reason, like I could be well rested. Within 15 minutes, I'm falling asleep if I'm reading a book, no matter what it is, unless I just woke up from a nap or I just woke up for the morning. And so that's when I have tried to like implement my reading is like, okay, I've got like a weekend where like I woke up and I've got some free time. Like, let me go ahead and like read for all of my immersion that day. And I found that it is kind of like, a hack. Like I feel like you get so much like input density because like obviously like audio visual content, like there's gaps, people aren't talking, there's action scenes, there's just other stuff going on. Whereas a book, it's like, oh, it's just text and that's all there is. And so I felt like it's been like really good, especially if you kind of get a setup where you can like mine sentences from it and you don't really care about not having like maybe the sentence audio, like you would if you was from an anime episode or something like that. And so I've been really trying to like push for it more now that like the more and more vocab you have, the easier it is to read. Because I think, especially at the beginning, like a lot of places recommend like just read, like listen and read. And it's like, okay, well, like that may be easier if it's like Spanish and like it's still in the Latin alphabet. But when you're dealing with kanji, it's like, okay, these lookups can even be cumbersome if you don't have like a setup where you can use a pop-up dictionary or something like that. Like it can become very actually like there's a lot of friction doing reading input.
That's true, because I also came from listening, so I understand that. And definitely at the beginning I was lacking vocab a lot, so I struggled with that. And I did use like Yomi-chan for one of them, the first book I read, I got it in HTML and then I used that. But after that, I was using like these scans of books, so there was no copyable text, and I didn't know about OCR either. So I was like manually trying to transcribe the words, and if I didn't know the kanji, I would guess it and like stuff like that. That was like really slow and cumbersome. But I think now that I use a Kindle and I can look up words easily with the Kindle and stuff like that, that also makes it easier. It's something people talk a lot about, how reading can make it easier to learn vocab, which is definitely true. But I think they exaggerate a little bit how much vocab you can actually find through audiovisual material. Because I think that most of the vocab is actually somewhere in an audiovisual material. If you engage with a variety of contents, you'll learn almost all of the words necessary to read that way. It's just that you'll learn it a lot slower because the density is lower, as you said.
I guess going back a bit, I also started and did like a bunch of raw listening, which I think is funny. So I think we definitely come from like a similar perspective. And that was mostly because I just like didn't take the time to set up stuff, or like didn't figure out how to use like ASB player or like stuff where I could really like just make life easier. And so like to make life easy, I'm like, oh, I'll just watch it raw. Like it'll work eventually. And like you said, I think that definitely is something that that can slow you down as you go. And so I think I would recommend like to people starting off, obviously use target language subtitles, and like that also gets you exposure to like reading. Like I know some people consider that reading. I don't know if I do really. I still feel like it's more of a listening activity, but it does help get you familiar and like more comfortable like seeing kanji and like the combination of all the three scripts. Because like I know when I first started reading, I did a lot of the like NHK Easy stuff. And like, I remember when I first saw those, I'd be like so scared. Like I was intimidated, like legitimately so afraid of like the wall of kanji on my screen. I was like, oh my God, like I will never be able to like read this. And like, it gets better. And then shout out to the Kindle. I also have one. I haven't used it a ton lately because I've been using like Mokuro Reader online for like manga, because manga kind of suck on the Kindle. But like actual books are great because you just can like highlight the word if you don't know it. So yeah, shout out to the Kindle. I think it's great, especially for like just like traditional novels, non-manga. You just literally, it's just so convenient, and it makes it so portable. You don't have to lug around books or anything, but you can still do it anywhere. So I recommend that.
Well, along those lines, I was wondering, what do you think about reading versus listening? What do you think the benefits and disadvantage of each is, and what would you recommend to people, depending on, everyone's goal is different, but what do you recommend to the average person?
Yeah, I think the average person, I would not recommend reading, especially at like an early phase. Like I would wait a bit just because I think it can be so discouraging with Japanese, like trying to read early, that you're gonna like potentially like lose your momentum and stop learning the language altogether. I really recommend starting with like stuff that you've already watched with English subtitles before, and now watch it like, and I should say, let me start from the beginning there. Don't watch it with English subtitles now. Stuff that you've watched with translations before, now watch it with Japanese subtitles, because I think then you already have an idea of what's going on and you can follow what's happening, so you don't have to like be stressed out at the beginning of like, I'm not understanding anything, like what's going on. Like I think that's a big hurdle for a lot of people, is like wanting to understand everything and break everything down, but you just know so little in the beginning that like that's not possible. And then I guess another, maybe this is a hot take, like I personally just think like audio visual content is just like better. I'm biased, but I feel like reading is good, but I feel like there's a lot of like people who just like only read, and like obviously if their goal is they only want to read content, then that's what they should practice, because that's what they want to do. I just feel like that's a very like limited perspective on the language, and like languages existed throughout all of history, like before written communication, and I think like if you're eventually planning on speaking one day, like just starting with reading so much, like I do feel like it could affect your accent. Not that, and maybe that will be something I mentioned kind of towards the end. I don't think worrying about the accent is too important. Like, I don't think it's something you should stress about, but I think like if you're only reading, like you could be able to read the language and not actually understand like anything someone speaks, which for me, I feel like most people wouldn't want that. So
Yeah, it just seems intuitive that you would want to be able to conversate with other people in the language.
yeah. So that's kind of how I feel. I know, like, it seems like more and more lately there's a lot of people who like only read. And I know, I think my guess is that like the gains that they get or they feel like they're getting from reading are like somewhat addictive, and it's like, okay, I'm just gonna like keep doing this. Like, why would I stop? It's too powerful.
Yeah, I think you definitely get a lot of gains, like because there's so much vocab to mine. If you're, say, reading a book, you're probably mining like every page. Like even if you know a lot of words, you're still mining like every page. And it's kind of like, it's like a line go up kind of mindset, like more Anki cards, more vocab. I know more Japanese, but it's not a linear progression. Like just its quality is also important. So I feel like there, like a lot of these people are really prioritizing the quantity of words and the quantity of things they mined, and how many characters they've inputted, rather than the quality of how well they've acquired the content, how well they understand the nuance of every word. And like, you don't really need to read to acquire like the language to a high level. Like I passed the N1 in 2.5 years, like heavily focusing on listening, and I got a near perfect score. And if you know about the N1, it's mostly nuance related questions. The reading, I actually got a perfect score on the reading section and the grammar section, all that stuff. So you can learn just fine just by listening as well.
Yeah, you kind of segued perfectly into my next question. I was going to kind of ask about the N1 test a little bit, and some of your thoughts having passed it. Do you feel like it's a good goal for language learners to have? Do you feel like, in particular, immersion learners, and do you feel like it is something that they should just take along the way and see if they're ready? How did you prepare, if you did prepare at all, for the test?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's mostly completely useless, in my honest opinion. There's no point to taking the N1 unless you're going to work in Japan. A lot of jobs will want you to have at least N2. I mean, they want proof that you speak Japanese. But if you're not going to do anything with it, there's no real point except like it's like it's a matter of pride. Like I literally took it because you have to take the N1. It's Japanese. You take the N1, and I wanted to be able to say I have the N1, and I knew I would do fine on the N1. And I wanted to say I got the N1 in 2.5 years, and I got this score because it's like a matter of pride. I wanted some kind of result for all of my hard work. But does it actually mean anything? Not really. There's no point to really learning that content just to study for the N1. But if you'd like to take it, there's nothing wrong with that. But you're spending $100 and potentially a plane ticket for no particular reason. But if you want to study for it, that's cool. If you want to learn it, if you want to take it, that's fine. I never did a lot of study specifically for it, but I had a study partner, and we would study for it together just every once in a while in person. And basically we just did practice questions. So I always tell people, if you're going to take it, the most important thing is that you've gotten a lot of input in the language. You have a strong fundamental understanding of nuance and how it works. And then I would recommend you take some practice tests to get a sense of how the test works. And also if you're going to pass at all. But there's a lot of practice tests online. But what I recommend most is there's this site that has all of the previous tests. So it's not really a practice test, it's the actual test. So I highly recommend that you go back and take tests from past years on this website. I'll send it to Greg so he can put it in the description, but I would definitely do that before you take the test, because a lot of people think they're better than they are and they fail the test. They think, I'm doing immersion, I must be amazing. But the skill required to take the test is something that is really specific. You need to deeply understand nuance. You need to understand what all the words, what context they're using. So it's possible to fail the test, even though you might even be fluent at speaking Japanese and still barely pass. I have a friend, he's quite fluent in Japanese, but he actually passed by 1 point on the test. So I would say take practice tests, understand your level, understand what the test is like, and then take it if you're going to take it. And if you want to move to Japan, then it's useful, but otherwise it's just a matter of you want to show off.
Yeah, no, I definitely put me in the pride category, because I will be taking it at some point, definitely for pride. And I think also for non-immersion learners, or just non-language learners at all, it can kind of be something like for my family, be like, hey, this wasn't just me in fairy tale land, not doing anything. I actually, have something tangible, to show for it. So I think that is where a lot of people come from. I do think there's probably a lot of pitfalls that I've seen, some immersion learners, but just Japanese learners in general fall into with the N1, where it's if it becomes your solo focus or solo goal, kind of leads you astray. I kind of, I guess, like to see it for myself would be something along the way where it's yeah, I'm going to take that. I'll spend a little time looking at it, but I want to, if I take the practice test and it's comfortable, then it's okay, it's time for the N1. If I don't, I'm not going to intentionally set aside time to start practicing those types of N1 questions, or study the list of N1 grammar points. I'd like to keep it kind of as natural and as organic as possible, how I learn.
That's fair. And I did do a pre-made deck to learn, because I wanted to learn the N1 words, make sure I knew them. But what I found was that none of those words appeared on the test anyway. It was just like I already knew all of the words I needed, and I just recommend that you immerse and you take a realistic stance on your level, because there's a lot of stories in the community about people who pass the N1 really quickly. You might have heard some of this, but there's like a guy who passed it in 6 months or perfect score in 1 year or something like that. But that's like, you're not special. Like, you're not that guy. You're a normal person. And if you take, like, don't take the test thinking that you're gonna, like, you're special, because you're just gonna be disappointed. You need to take a realistic stance on your level.
Yeah, I think it goes back to what we've talked about, like being honest with yourself and like really looking in the mirror and evaluating where you're at. And so I think a good follow-up to this that's kind of somewhat related to like the nuance of understanding Japanese words in context. What do you feel about the monolingual transition? I watched one of the videos you made a while ago. I think it was older, and I'm curious what your thoughts are now on the monolingual transition and kind of how beneficial that is, or where it's beneficial.
Yeah, so that video is probably really old, like over 2 years, and I've changed a lot since I made that video. I'm sure you can tell. I'm pretty sure I look completely different, but yeah, that I think that I actually rewatched that video recently because you put this question in the list. But I think that monolingual transition can be useful, but it's not really very important at all. And I think Livakivi made a video about it recently. I haven't seen his video, so if I'm saying the same points, I'm not copying him. It's just we both have the same views. But I think that it can be useful, but it's basically not very useful for the most part, but it's still worth doing. Like, I actually started the monolingual transition from day one, and I think that's fine. But like nowadays, I actually don't use monolingual definitions very much because I'm incredibly lazy. And so I just make automatic cards via this like Takobodo. There's this app, Takobodo. It's a Japanese dictionary for Android. I just use that to automatically make cards. I don't manually make cards or use monolingual definitions anymore. Now, I think you can definitely gain a lot, and it's worth doing that, but that isn't going to make and break your learning experience. And there's a lot of words that are better defined without using a monolingual definition. So if it's a physical object, it's much better to just put a word that you know in your native language. It's faster, it's easier, but there are many situations where it's better to put a monolingual definition, but you're going to acquire it naturally anyway, so it doesn't matter that much. Now, in my original video, I think I recommended that you start from day one with monolingual transition. Now, if I restarted Japanese, I would still start from day one with the monolingual transition. But whether you do that or not, I don't think it's that important. It really depends on your goal. But my goal was to become the best at Japanese and master everything about Japanese. So I would still do that because I want to master Japanese definitions. That's a part of the language. I want to know everything. But if you have a more normal goal, like you just want to learn Japanese, then I don't think there's any problem with avoiding the monolingual transition, and you'll still learn Japanese just fine.
I've found, so like I've been lately peeking around and like messing with monolingual definitions. I haven't made any cards with them on there yet. I've found for like you said, like nouns or objects, it's like, nah, like just give it to me in English, please. Where I've found it like makes more sense is like a lot of times with like verbs or like other adverby things, or like onomatopoeia words. Like you'll read the English definition and then like look at the context. You're like, okay, like that doesn't make sense. Like how they described it to me. That's kind of when now I'm like, okay, let me go read the monolingual definition, and usually I'm like, oh, that's what they meant. That makes way more sense. And even like some nouns I've had, I don't know parts of speech I don't pay attention to that much, but maybe adjectives, I guess, I suppose. Like some adjectives are kind of funky with like how they describe the English translation, but how they're actually used is like not how I would translate it if I like translated the whole sentence. And so like that's where I've definitely started to like see like, okay, I definitely should have this available to me. But I think the bigger thing, and this is probably something for everyone to keep in mind, is that like English is not Japanese and Japanese is not English. And so you need to understand that like you can't just translate like a sentence to sentence or like the meaning, if the direct meaning of the Japanese translation to English. And like I feel like as long as you're aware of that and like understanding that while you're like immersing and going through stuff and like trying to figure out a sentence that you don't understand, it's not going to like trip you up or like make you like more confused in the long run, I guess. Because I do feel like there are some learners, or maybe this is probably more so from like more traditional learning methods, but like there's times like they'll give a translation of something, it'll be like, oh, I just would not have even translated that. Like I just think about it in Japanese, which like I can't explain to non-immersion learners, like, or like I'm like, oh, I don't really think about it like in English. Like I think about it as it comes in Japanese, and like remembering that like while you're doing lookups and stuff is like, you shouldn't think about like an English centric or native language centric view as you're breaking these sentences down. Really focus on like the Japanese of it, which sounds so obvious and almost condescending to like say, but it's a good thing to keep in the back of your head, I feel like.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, as you said, the part of speech is important. And if you look up the English definition and you don't understand it, then you definitely should use the Japanese definition. That's a common thing. But yeah, that's a common experience, especially around intermediate level. You'll be learning words that the English definition doesn't really cut it. So I think that there's definitely words you want to use the monolingual definition. Especially there's a lot of cultural words, even when it comes to nouns. There might be some word where it's like the frickin', I don't know, the draft, or like, I don't know, like some kind of like a what's that, a sheet or something, like some kind of cult, like something they used 2,000 years ago, and like some like kabuki dancer danced behind a sheet or something. Like in that case, it's gonna have a really confusing English definition. Probably you might want to look it up in Japanese to truly understand what it means. But another thing I also recently realized is that using AI can be super useful. So if you don't understand what a word means, and you should probably try asking ChatGPT or something, because I found that it actually gives you pretty accurate definitions that maybe you wouldn't be able to glean from the dictionary.
Like you feel like it can describe like Japanese concepts in English better than like a dictionary could?
Yeah, because it depends. Sometimes it could give you some nonsense, but because ChatGPT knows English and Japanese, and it has all of that knowledge from Japanese, like the monolingual definitions in it, so it can kind of give you like a more robust definition than maybe Jisho might have.
That's definitely something that like is such a good resource. And like while I get sad sometimes that I didn't start language learning like during COVID, like looking back, I now like, I think even from 5 years ago, which is crazy to say that it's already been 5 years since COVID, but like even that short amount of time, like the amount of tools and like stuff available to us as language learners is like so much greater.
Yeah, absolutely. And I found that ChatGPT actually helps me a lot with output. Sometimes I want to say something, and I might even know how to say it, but I can't remember. And if I ask ChatGPT, it'll usually give me a natural expression, or mostly natural expression, and I can kind of branch from there and figure out how to say something. So I actually think that using AI is underrated, it's an underrated way to help you improve your Japanese a lot.
Okay, you are just killing it on these segues today because I wanted to talk a bit about output now that you mention it. And output, I have not outputted yet. I do, like, I can say stuff sometimes, but I haven't tried to, like, generate Japanese sentences directly to my brain or anything like that. What do you feel like are I guess, first of all, when do you feel like is the right time to start? I guess to give you where I'm planning on starting. I was planning on starting when I get to like 10,000 words, which I'm pretty close to. And there's really nothing like stopping me at this point. Like, I feel like I probably could like fairly easily have a conversation. Like, I think I would struggle to talk. I don't think I would struggle to understand, but I think I would struggle to like say what I want to say, and I need practice like building up that muscle. So I'm curious how you've like practiced output and like building up that muscle of like thoughts to Japanese.
Yeah, I mean, this is a really loaded topic. There, a lot of people have really strong opinions about this. The silent period, I think it's pretty controversial, but I would say that you should probably start outputting earlier than me. I mean, I started outputting at 1.5 years, but you also have to consider my pace. I was on like the fast track to Japanese. So I think that I actually never got to 10,000 words in my Anki. So, or at least in my original mining deck. So I think that when you feel ready to output is when you're ready to output. If you feel like you want to start outputting, you can start outputting. If you feel like because when I started, I was at the point where I was like, I felt like I could understand most Japanese, and this was the natural evolution. I needed to start outputting. So I feel like whenever you're comfortable outputting is when you should start outputting. I don't have a strong opinion on it. I think outputting from day one is probably a bad idea because you don't even know anything. You can't even understand what the other person's saying. But if you can mostly understand the other person, you have a good grasp of daily conversation, you've been doing it like a year or more, I think you can probably start outputting like anytime, like you're ready. And it's going to be tough to start outputting, but if you already have a foundation in the language, you're going to roughly know what to say, and like you'll be bad, but like you'll be able to communicate at a basic level. And the thing is, you'll catch up to people that have like someone doing traditional who has been outputting from day one might be better than you when you start outputting, but you'll catch up to them in like 1 month if you output every day. So I think that it's not that much of a concern to delay output. And there's people who got good with early or late output, but I think you should start when it feels comfortable for you. And now how you output, that's pretty challenging. There's a lot of ways to output. The easiest way, to be honest, is in person. Probably a lot of you are not going to have that option because you don't live in Japan or you don't live in a place with Japanese people. But the best way to output is in person. And then if you can't output in person, then you can output online.
That definitely makes sense. And I know there's a lot of, like you said, controversy around when you should speak. I definitely have not been like intentionally avoiding it. I've just kind of felt like, oh, I'm still learning a lot, and I still feel like, there's more I can understand and kind of get better. So that's kind of been my perspective. And having learned a lot of French with like the output from day one stuff, like I realized that like my accent, like there was just totally things that like, not even accent, just things I would like just straight up say wrong, and not realize I was saying wrong. And like that was even with like, again, like a Haitian lineage where I have some of that like accent, like actually being around it quite a bit. And so that like scared me some. It's like, well, like this is so different. Like while it'd be cool to speak from day one, like there's really no need for me to currently. So I'm just gonna kind of kind of chill out. Now that I'm thinking about, like, I do want to start outputting, I've got to, I think, start looking into like what's locally available that, like, or like Japanese gatherings, or I don't know, for like in-person stuff. My main strategy was really just going to be like spam italki, hello talk stuff. I don't know what success you've had. I know you mentioned hello talk earlier. Have you had any success with those?
So there's all of those are definitely valid ways to output, but I think that they're challenging for beginners. And I'd say, I mean, maybe we could talk about it after the interview too, but like, I would definitely search your area. I don't know where you live, but if you would, I would definitely do some research and find out if there's Japanese people locally. 'Cause to be honest, if you're not already pretty decent at the language and you join a random chat room or something, like, people just view you as an annoyance. It's kind of like, it's kind of tough to say that, but if you don't sound good enough yet, like, people will probably view you as annoying. Because, like, imagine if you're talking to someone in a voice room and then some random Indian, and he has an accent, like, he doesn't know what he's saying and you can barely understand what he's saying. He joins the chat and, like, it can be kind of annoying. So I'd say either one-on-one online conversations or in person are the best ways to go about it. I started outputting with this app called, something FM, Stand FM. It's not around anymore, or maybe it is, but I don't think it's popular, but it was like a radio app. And this is one of the best ways I recommend to start outputting, is basically people would stream themselves. They would stream themselves talking about various topics, kind of like a radio. And then, like, you would join the chat and you can type in the chat and they'll respond to your comments. So I feel like maybe you can do it with streamers as well. Join a stream or something like this. There's another app called Spoon. Join something like that. And then practice texting. Like, practice talking back to them in text, because there's a lot less stress. If you're talking to someone with your voice, it's like, my accent, am I speaking fast enough? It's like, it might be awkward. So I found it to be a little bit easier of a transition to go from texting a streamer with like almost no viewers. So like they would have like 5 people listening to the radio stream, and I would message in there and we would have conversations basically. And eventually, like, I became friends with some of these people. We exchanged lines and then we talked one-on-one outside of that. And I also found a single Japanese person at this community college in my area. And I got along with this Japanese guy and we talked a lot. So I basically got my start in outputting through this one Japanese guy and this app online that I was talking about. But you can also use something like HelloTalk or italki. If you use italki, then you could maybe pay for someone to talk to you. That's probably the easiest route, because they're going to be really nice. They're going to take their time. They're going to help you speak. But with HelloTalk, it's a lot more competitive. There's so many people that want to learn Japanese, and most of them are not very good, and all of the people are getting spammed. All the Japanese people are getting spammed with tons of messages from foreigners who want to practice Japanese, especially if it's a girl. But so if you don't already speak decent Japanese, you kind of like are going to get buried. You're not going to stand out. Just, another guy who wants to practice Japanese. But there are voice rooms on HelloTalk, which can be useful. Join a random voice room, and most of them will be kind of nice because they know that you're learning. And there's also online Zoom meetups. Meetup.com is another resource for in-person, but there's online meetups on Zoom. You can join those and have conversation as well. So that's a couple of resources.
Nice. Yeah. I think along the lines of speaking, I want to ask a hot topic, maybe controversial question. It's not maybe, it is. I want to ask about pitch accent and your thoughts on it.
I think pitch accent is important, but it's not it's not the most important thing. And there's a lot of focus on pitch accent that probably isn't necessary. I think a lot of people are worrying about pitch accent when they have a way bigger things to worry about. But I would say it's worth learning. Like, I put pitch accent on all my cards. I paid attention to pitch accent and I tried to hear it. And you can do like pitch accent training, ear training and stuff. And I'm sure it's useful. I'm sure that's useful. And I think it is useful to learn pitch accent because it'll make your accent sound a lot better. In fact, when Japanese people, imitate a foreigner, they usually imitate the pitch accent being bad. That's like their impression of a foreigner. And if your pitch accent is good, they'll usually be surprised. Like, oh, they'll make a comment. Actually, this is one of the most common things I get told, even though my pitch accent isn't that great. It doesn't really sound like an American accent. So they'll say like, oh, your like intonation, like your intonation doesn't sound like an American. So I'd say it's worth learning and paying attention to and putting on your cards when you learn a word, but you don't have to obsess over it. As long as you can perceive it, do some ear training, that's good. And you don't have to obsess over it at all. And there's a lot of people who are they're going really deep down this pitch accent rabbit hole. Like, how do they're studying all the rules and the linguistics and all this stuff. And they can't, you can't even speak Japanese, bro. Like, what are you doing? Like you gotta speak Japanese first before you start worrying about the minutia of whether this word goes up or down on this syllable in this circumstance. Like, that doesn't matter. As long as you have decent pitch accent and you know Japanese, it's okay. You don't have to obsess over it.
I cannot agree more. I've been going down the pitch accent rabbit hole a bit lately with thinking about speaking soon, and so I'm doing Dogen's Patreon course, and I think there's a lot of great information in there, and it's especially useful if you wanted to use it how what's the rule for this, or but at the end of the day, kind of like we talked earlier, a lot of these rules are kind of nebulous or made up somewhat. It's most Japanese people aren't thinking about these. None of them are.
They don't even know that pitch accent exists.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think when you put so much effort into it, like a lot of learners do, and you try to memorize all these rules, you just kind of go down a path, like you said, where it's well, this isn't really important. And I often wonder about, I think because it's become such a hot topic, it's drove people to extremes of each side. But I do feel for the average learner, the goal of sounding perfectly native is extremely unhealthy because I think English, if you speak to someone from Europe, let's say you speak to someone who's Dutch, and they clearly have a accent, but their English is perfect still. But they just have a Dutch accent. That's what they sound like. And English is probably one of the few languages in the world where that's kind of the norm and acceptable, and English speakers are used to that. But I think if you are pronouncing things correctly, and maybe your pitch accent's off, or maybe you don't sound perfectly native, like you said, in general, you're not speaking in a extremely foreigner, heavy accent, I think that's a good enough goal for most people. I can understand if you want to be perfect. I just think you could shoot for perfection in other areas. I don't know.
I agree. And I think the reality is that you're not going to be perfect. You're not perfect at Japanese. And even if you want to be perfect at Japanese, you're never going to become perfect at Japanese. 99% of people 99.999% of people are never going to have perfect pitch accent. And that's okay. It doesn't matter whether you have perfect pitch accent. If you speak Japanese and your accent isn't grating, you want to have a decent accent so it's not grating to the speaker. Because if they feel like it's uncomfortable to talk to you, that's a problem. But if your accent is pretty decent, you're fluent at speaking, you're good, man. It's not worth the trouble. But I do think, I watched Dogen's videos as well, his pitch accent course back in the day. There's definitely some rules in there that are really important, worth internalizing. that will improve your Japanese. For example, four more nouns being what heiban is like a useful rule that if you know that, help make your Japanese a lot better. But I think that in general, you don't have to worry about it so much.
Yeah, I think a lot of like you said, beginner learners like fall in this trap of like, I'm gonna memorize every rule. It's like, well, you can't speak that way. And I think I just got to a video somewhere in Dogen's series where he's like, actually, I've been telling people to think about these rules when they speak, but absolutely do not think about these at all now, because like it's not a way to speak. Like I don't think about how I'm gonna pronounce something in English. I just say it, and you're gonna have to, do work outside of when you're actually speaking to try to correct your like flow state speaking, I guess. So, okay. One thing I wanted to ask you, and I think it's important as language learners to make sure that we keep on moving forward and we don't just get caught in that intermediate plateau. I definitely feel like I'm there right now. So I want to know ways that you kind of continually push yourself out of your comfort zone as a language learner.
Yeah. So no, I think that continuing to push yourself out of your comfort zone is actually really important. It's a really underrated, maybe we could call it a skill or a way to immerse. But a lot of people get stuck in this trap where they're always watching anime, they're always reading light novels, they're always engaging with the same material, and they're never going to reach what maybe not like a native like proficiency in the language. Because if you think about a native or someone who's really competent in a language, they're encountering a lot of different domains. Like a Japanese person has seen dramas, anime, they've read manga, they've read books, they've engaged with educational content, YouTube. They've engaged with everything in the span of their life, and that's why they have such a diverse vocabulary and ability. So I think it's really important to constantly push yourself with harder and different content. So in exercise, there's this idea of progressive overload. I'm sure you know about it, but when you're working out, you want to progressively go to more difficult, like heavier weights or something like that to continue growing your muscles. Because if you keep going with the same weight forever, you're going to plateau and never go past a certain level. So it's kind of the same thing here. So when I was immersing, I saved the best content and the hardest content for last. So usually the best content is going to be on the harder end. I think you might have found that with a lot of anime. A lot of really good story-focused anime are going to be hard, like Attack on Titan, for example. That's a pretty challenging anime, but it's also very good. So what I did was I saved some of the best content that I knew was going to be hard until later on. And then as I got better, I started to engage with the content that I'd saved for myself for later on. So I started out just like yourself. I watched anime that I had already seen before, and I only watched stuff I had already seen before. So that was like the first 6 months or so. Then from there, I kind of went to some easy anime that I hadn't seen before, slice of life and stuff like that. Then I started moving up to more difficult anime, like medium anime. And then I started trying to watch some harder content with Japanese subtitles. And that's around the point when I was starting to use a lot of dramas as well. I started watching Japanese dramas, and then I realized, there's so much new vocab and stuff in this material that I didn't know about. So I continuously challenged myself with new content I wasn't familiar with, YouTube as well. I was always watching YouTube quite a bit, but mainly anime-related YouTube at the beginning, and then I started to branch out into more difficult YouTube content and dramas and things like that. And then I manga to get better at reading. And then after I had felt like I had, kind of mastered these ones, I moved on to light novels and things like that. And I only went for easy light novels, but slowly I tried more difficult material. And it's the same with anime. Like there's anime I saved until pretty recently, actually. There's Legend of the Galactic Heroes is an anime that's well known for being very difficult. So I started watching that like last year or something. And, but yeah, that's the way that I did it. I basically saved the harder content And I slowly engaged with different and harder types of content the longer I had been doing it. And once I felt comfortable with something, I would move on to the next kind of material.
Yeah, I think that is a similar approach I've tried to take. Like you said, eventually I kind of graduated out of stuff that I've already watched. I still have some of those like in my routine for like days where I just need something easy, like turn my brain off. So like right now that's like Bleach for me. It's been like 10 years since I watched it. And I'm like, you know what? Like if I have a day where I just need to come home and not think too hard, but still want to get my Japanese in, that's what I'll do. But other than that, typically I've been like basically ramping up the difficulty. Like you said, I've been saving like some of the harder things similarly. Um, and then trying to like jump around between domains. Like dramas are, it's still Japanese, but that's different than anime. I think one area that I'd like to get stronger in is like real, like more like colloquial Japanese. So like I have like not watched any YouTube, and like part of it is I haven't found any like Japanese YouTubers that I've found to be like super engaging for me personally. And so like finding stuff that I like in the different domains is like kind of where I've struggled a bit. Is like I found animes I like, dramas I like. Now YouTube and books are like the two thing I would really like to find some stuff that I like to keep moving me forward, because like I've noticed, like I was watching Terrace House recently, the original season, because I had never watched that one because it was like really hard to find. And I was like, at one point I was like, yeah, I understand a lot, but there's just like a lot of like things they're saying that like, I'm just like, oh, like they don't say that in a drama because it's acted, but these are real people talking. So like they're saying things or like using colloquial speech. I'm like, and then eventually you start to pick it up. But like, because I haven't done a lot of YouTube and like just heard people talking, and not that people talk perfectly natural on YouTube, but there's like some IRL stuff where they are basically essentially speaking naturally, and like getting into stuff like that. And like you said, some educational content. I feel like it would be interesting to like watch videos, like educational videos about like normal stuff, but in Japanese, just to kind of see like one, like how do they explain concepts, like, because I don't really know that. I only know from like an English perspective how we would view concepts and stuff like that. I feel like are areas I can feel myself hitting the plateau because of that. So it's good to know that if I can, even if it's not super fun at first, because I'm not comfortable with it for YouTube and like books, if I can break through that and start to get a little more used to it, then maybe I actually find something that I do enjoy. Like I could be just so close-minded right now because I'm like, I just have in my mind, like, I don't like reading or I don't like books. Like, and I found manga. I'm like, I like these manga. Like, this is good. And I'm kind of starting with stuff where like I've watched the anime of the manga. I'm like, and I'll go back and read the manga just because it's something that like I'm a little more familiar with, to like ease into it. But soon I want to start being like, okay, this is a brand new, like, I've never touched it before reading material, because that's been something that's been tough for me to find. So we'll have to talk after a bit about some, or I'll have you send me your list of recommendations.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think my content intake changed a lot over time. When I was first watching YouTube, I watched a lot of anime related content, VTubers, and that kind of stuff. But when I got older and better at Japanese, I was more interested in educational content. So like nowadays, I mostly watch content related to like daily life commentary, like 30-minute videos of old men talking kind of stuff, and or also educational content. There's some interesting educational channels, and I found that's the best way to challenge myself now, because I'm learning this knowledge I can actually use in Japanese.
Yeah, I think Yeah, I gotta make sure I explore more. And like even some stuff like uh a lot of times I'll watch like Japanese Super Smash Brothers streams, and like that's like the most colloquial Japanese I'll get is like some of their streamers just like talking with chat and stuff. But typically, I still just like avoid so much like more natural, like fully natural stuff, just because like I'm so, I don't know, maybe afraid of taking that plunge. But I do know some of it too is like if it's like live streamed, it's harder to like impossible to, like mine from essentially. You technically could, but it'd be very manual doing stuff with like VODs, which I have no interest in doing it that way. But yeah, no, I think that's really good insight. But I think I got one more question. It's actually I'm stealing your question. I think we can both end with this and kind of have some thoughts on it. What is the most important or useful thing to be a successful Japanese learner in your mind?
Well, the number one most important thing is mindset and consistency. You have to get up every day. You have to do it, whether you want to do it or not that day. Some days it's going to suck, and you do it anyway. And it's really important to not have this defeatist mindset. Like you have to believe that you will learn Japanese, and you will learn Japanese if the most important thing is that you just every day you get up and you have in your mind you have a goal. You know what your goal is, and you're like, I'm going to accomplish this goal. I want to accomplish this goal. And in order to do that, I'm going to be consistent every day. You know, consistency is key. They even say that in Japanese. But keizoku wa chikara nari. But like, you really have to be consistent every day and not quit. You don't want to have long breaks. That's one of the things that is really common among learners who didn't get good, even though they worked hard, is that they would go really hard and then they would burn out and take a long break. You want to have a realistic goal that you can consistently achieve every day and just continue doing that for a long period of time, and then you will definitely learn Japanese.
I think that's great advice, especially with consistency. It is like not to sound condescending, but like don't quit. Like it sounds so simple, but like be stubborn and like don't quit if you truly want it. And you know, I agree with like a daily habit of like a daily minimum. Like my daily minimum is like no matter what, I will do my Anki. Like nothing will stop me unless I am like dead or in the hospital from doing my Anki. And so that kind of grounds me. And like once you do your Anki, it's like, okay, well, might as well do the rest. And that's, you know, I think you shouldn't ever have like let yourself slip to no Japanese a day, because if you do that, it's like, well, it's going to stop you from doing that again at some point, and then you get into that long break. A couple other tips that I think are super important that I've seen people kind of fall into. We talked about the pitch accent a little bit, or trying to sound perfectly like a native, maybe just derailing your actual studies. But another one I think is super important is like, do not spend too much time trying to optimize your language learning routine if you already have something that's effective. And you should be looking to iterate upon your process and like make it better. But you can't just be looking at it every single day like, well, I could do this. Like my cards could look better here. And like, if you fall into that trap, you won't actually spend any time learning. And like, I see a lot of people in Discords like falling into those traps, and I'm just like, rip. Like, and I can see the benefit to what they're doing though, because I've learned a lot from those people. Like, I feel like I'm stealing all their efficiencies after they've like ironed everything out. I'm like, oh, like when I did ASB player and like started doing a bunch of things with like super easy mining setups that are like 2 clicks basically, I'm like, oh my god, like thanks for doing this. Like I just look usually at once every couple months. I'm like, is there anything that I've found has been like not smooth in the process, or something I could do to make it better? And I kind of try to take a big picture view over longer intervals rather than every day being like, man, like, I wish I could make my sentence mining 2 clicks into 1 click. Like, it's like, okay, how much time are you spending to get that set up versus how much time are you going to like save per card? Like, probably not that much. 2 clicks is pretty easy. So that's one piece of advice I think is super important for a lot of people. Another one, time tracking. I think a lot of people do not like track their time, and there are people who don't need to, who are just like locked in. But I think for like the average person, especially when you're first starting off, like 2 hours will feel a lot longer than you think. Like, you'll be like, it was like 2 hours, and like it was actually 45 minutes because it was so much work for your brain that you were doing to try to process the language. So like tracking your time when you first start, especially, I think can like help you get on track. Also, it like gives you, I feel like I like seeing the number go up, even if it's just slow consistently. Like, I like seeing that over 2.25 years now that I'm averaging 2 hours and like 2 minutes a day. Like, I like seeing those numbers, and I feel like a lot of people, like, it helps like be like, oh yeah, I am doing this. Like, and yeah, my time is going to, add up in the end to being able to be fluent. And then the last thing I have is what we've talked about multiple times, like being honest with yourself, being reflective, and like looking in the mirror and really, determining what the best path forward for yourself is, and being realistic. And I think if you can do that, everything else is going to fall into place for you, and not just language learning, but life. So, well, thank you for joining me here today. I know we talked a lot. I always enjoy talking about language learning in Japanese specifically. I'm sure the listeners enjoyed listening as well, and got a lot of useful information. I know I did. So as a reminder, I'm going to leave all 7-Stop stuff down in the description below. So check that out. And any final thoughts for you?
I mean, yeah, this was a super awesome conversation. I feel like it's pretty valuable. Like, if I had seen something like this, I would have felt like I gained a lot when I was first learning Japanese. So I think there's a lot of interesting insights here, and I hope you guys learned something from this video and work hard at Japanese.
Yep, we'll see you in the next one.